They can look at you with soft eyes, they can hold your face gently, they can whisper words that feel like forever. They can memorize your favorite song, your coffee order, the story about your childhood that still hurts. They can text you good morning and stay up late talking about dreams. They can create moments that feel like love. But here's the truth that hurts and heals at the same time. Avoidance can fake love, but they cannot fake attachment. And if you've ever felt confused, addicted, or emotionally starved in something that looked like love but never felt secure, this is why. Love is a feeling. Attachment is a bond. Love is chemistry. Attachment is safety. Love can be performed. Attachment exposes the nervous system. Love can exist in words and gestures. Attachment shows up in patterns, especially when things get uncomfortable. An avoidant can experience attraction, passion, affection, even genuine care. But attachment requires surrender. It requires depending and being depended on. It requires staying when every instinct inside them says run. And that is where the performance cracks. The reason this is so confusing for you is because what they feel in the beginning is not entirely fake. They feel something real. The excitement is real, the pull is real, the fascination is real. But attachment is not about excitement, it is about emotional anchoring. It is about what happens when conflict appears. It is about what happens when vulnerability deepens. It is about what happens when you need reassurance instead of romance. That is where you start noticing the shift. That is where the warmth turns into distance. That is where the confusion begins. You probably remember the early stage, the intensity, the way they seemed so invested, the deep conversations that made you feel chosen, the subtle vulnerability that made you think they've never opened up like this before. In those moments, it felt like love. And maybe it was. But attachment is tested over time. Attachment reveals itself in consistency. Attachment means the nervous system does not panic when closeness increases. Avoidance can simulate closeness when it feels voluntary and controlled. But the moment it feels necessary, expected, or binding, something changes inside them. There is a difference between wanting someone and attaching to someone. Wanting is desire, attaching is risk. When someone is attached, losing, you would shake them. It would disrupt their sense of safety. It would activate anxiety because their nervous system has bonded. When someone is not attached, they can walk away while still claiming they care. They may feel sad, they may miss you, but they are not destabilized, and that difference is everything. Avoidants learn early that dependence is dangerous. Emotional needs were not consistently met. Vulnerability may have been ignored, dismissed, or subtly punished. So they adapted. They became self-contained. They built an identity around independence. They trained themselves to suppress needs rather than express them. Over time, they mastered the art of appearing emotionally steady while internally disconnecting from attachment signals. Love in their world became something they could engage in as long as it did not threaten their autonomy. So they learn to perform connection without fully surrendering to it. They can mirror your affection. They can study what makes you feel loved. They can intellectually understand romance. But attachment is not intellectual. It is biological. It lives in the body. And when attachment starts forming, their body feels it as danger. Increased closeness activates subconscious alarms. Commitment feels like loss of control. Emotional reliance feels like weakness. And instead of leaning in, they instinctively lean out. This is why the first thing they cannot fake is emotional safety under pressure. When everything is calm, they can be affectionate and attentive. But when tension appears, when you express hurt, when you ask for reassurance, when conflict surfaces, watch what happens. Their tone changes. Their body stiffens. They withdraw or become defensive. They may shut down completely. You can see it in their eyes. Something closes. That reaction is not calculated. It is automatic. It is their nervous system protecting itself from perceived engulfment. If someone is truly attached, conflict does not erase connection. It may create discomfort, but it does not create detachment. They stay engaged. They want resolution because the bond matters. Avoidants, when not securely attached, experience conflict as a threat to autonomy. Instead of moving closer to repair, they move away to regulate themselves. You are left trying to fix something alone while they convince themselves space is the solution. That is not attachment, that is self-preservation. The second thing they cannot fake is consistency over time. In the beginning, effort feels exciting. It is new, it is stimulating. There is no pressure yet, but attachment deepens through repetition. through showing up on ordinary days, through choosing the same person when novelty fades. Avoidance struggle here. You may notice hot and cold patterns, intense closeness followed by unexplained distance, passionate words followed by emotional unavailability. This inconsistency is not random. It reflects their internal conflict between desire and fear. When attachment starts forming, they feel the loss of emotional independence. Instead of embracing that bond, they create space to reduce the intensity. They may tell themselves they need to focus on work. They may suddenly question compatibility. They may nitpick small flaws. These justifications help them regulate the anxiety attachment creates. If they were truly anchored, closeness would feel stabilizing, not suffocating. Consistency requires tolerating emotional dependence, and that is something they cannot fake for long. The third thing they cannot fake is deep emotional transparency. They can talk about ideas for hours, they can analyze relationships philosophically, they can even discuss past pain in a detached way. But ask them what they are feeling right now, in real time, especially about you, and watch the discomfort surface. Attachment requires emotional exposure. It requires saying, I'm scared of losing you. It requires admitting jealousy, insecurity, longing. Those feelings threaten their self image of independence. You may have felt this wall, the sense that you are emotionally reaching toward them, but touching glass. They respond, but not fully. They share, but selectively. They reveal, but only in controlled doses. True attachment melts that barrier. It creates a desire to be known, even in vulnerability. If someone consistently avoids that depth, they may love you in their way, but they are not fully attached. The fourth thing they cannot fake is staying present during conflict. When arguments happen, when emotions escalate, when tears appear, attachment calls for engagement. It says, don't leave, work through this. Avoidants often do the opposite. They detach, they shut down, they may physically leave the room, they may emotionally disappear, even while sitting next to you. Their body language becomes distant, their voice becomes flat. This is not indifference, it is overwhelm. But attachment tolerates overwhelm because the bond feels more important than escape. When someone is attached, they may struggle in conflict, but they do not disconnect from the relationship itself. They fear rupture. Avoidants, who are not securely bonded, fear engulfment more than rupture. So they choose distance to soothe themselves, even if it destabilizes you. That pattern reveals the absence of deep attachment. The fifth thing they cannot fake is vulnerability without losing control. They may express affection, they may say they care, but sustained vulnerability requires giving up emotional control. It requires admitting need. It requires allowing someone else to matter enough that their actions affect your internal state. Avoidants fight this. You may notice that whenever things become too intimate, too emotionally intense, they pull back slightly, not enough to end it, just enough to regain control. If you have ever felt like the relationship only feels safe when you are not asking for much, this is why they can maintain closeness as long as it remains light and manageable. But when you start leaning emotionally, when you start depending, when you start envisioning a shared future with certainty, their fear activates. They may not consciously think, I'm scared of attachment. Instead, they feel irritation, doubt, or sudden uncertainty. They interpret attachment signals as pressure. And here is the part that is hardest to accept. They may genuinely believe they love you. They are not necessarily lying, but love without attachment is unstable. It is like a flame without a foundation. It burns bright but cannot anchor. You feel the heat, but you never feel secure. You are constantly analyzing their tone, their texting patterns, their energy shifts. That anxiety inside you is responding to inconsistency. Your nervous system senses the absence of true bonding. Attachment feels different. It feels steady. It feels chosen repeatedly. It feels safe during disagreement. It feels emotionally accessible. It does not mean perfect behavior. It means the relationship itself becomes something both people protect. Avoidance can simulate romance, but they cannot simulate the biological calm of secure bonding if it has not formed within them. If you are listening to this and recognizing your story, understand something important. Your confusion does not mean you imagine the connection. It means you experienced love without attachment, and that combination is powerful but destabilizing. You were responding to moments of closeness, hoping they would solidify into something consistent. But attachment cannot be forced. It cannot be begged into existence. It either forms through mutual vulnerability and safety, or it does not. And when it does not, no amount of your patience, reassurance, or understanding can create it alone. You cannot attach for two people. You cannot regulate someone else's fear of closeness. You can love them deeply. You can see their potential. You can understand their wounds. But if their nervous system equates attachment with danger, they will continue oscillating between connection and distance. So as we move forward, we are going deeper into the 9 things they cannot fake. Because once you understand the difference between performed love and real attachment, you stop chasing words. You start observing patterns. You stop clinging to moments. You start evaluating consistency. And most importantly, you begin choosing bonds that feel safe, not just intense. This is not about blaming them. It is about protecting you. Because you deserve a love that does not vanish under pressure. You deserve attachment that stays when things get hard. And once you see the difference, you can never unsee it. You deserve attachment that stays when things get hard. And once you see the difference, you can never unsee it. So now we go deeper, because the next layers are where the illusion fully breaks. These are the patterns that quietly reveal whether someone is bonded to you or just orbiting you. The 6th thing they cannot fake is prioritizing you over their independence. Independence is not just a preference for them. It is their identity. It is the armor they built when vulnerability once felt unsafe. So when attachment begins forming, it threatens that identity. Real attachment requires integration. It requires considering someone else in your decisions. It requires sacrifice at times. It requires saying, "This matters more than my comfort." Watch closely what happens when your needs conflict with their autonomy. Do they adjust, or do they subtly resent you? Do they make room for you in their plans, or do you always feel like you are fitting into the leftover space of their life? An avoidant who is not deeply attached will protect independence at all costs. They may say you matter, they may even believe it. But when push comes to shove, they choose freedom over fusion. They choose space over solution. They choose self-containment over shared vulnerability. And you are left feeling like loving you is optional in their world. Attachment changes priorities. When someone is bonded, you are not an accessory to their life. You are part of it. Your feelings influence their choices. Your presence shapes their future. If you constantly feel like you are competing with their need for space, if you feel like asking for closeness feels like asking for too much, that is not attachment. That is someone managing proximity. The 7th thing they cannot fake is emotional regulation in intimate moments. Intimacy is not just physical closeness. It is emotional merging. It is eye contact that lingers too long. It is conversations that expose fears. It is the silence that feels safe instead of awkward. It is the afterglow of connection when both nervous systems feel calm. Avoidants can participate in intimacy. They can even crave it. But when it becomes too emotionally grounding, something shifts. You may notice that after a deeply connecting moment, they become distant. After a vulnerable conversation, they suddenly need space. After a night where everything felt aligned, the next day feels colder. That pullback is not random. Deep connection activates attachment circuitry, and attachment activates fear. Their system says, this is getting too real, so they regulate by creating distance. If someone is securely attached, intimacy soothes them. It makes them feel anchored. If someone is avoidant and not fully bonded, intimacy destabilizes them. Have you ever felt confused? Because the closer you felt, the further they moved? That is your answer. Real attachment deepens after intimacy. It does not retreat from it. The 8th thing they cannot fake is integrating you into their inner world. Surface integration is easy. You meet friends, you attend events, you exist in their routine. But inner world integration is different. It is when they let you see their shame, their doubts, their insecurities, their hidden fears, not just the polished narrative, not just the trauma story told with emotional distance, but the raw, unfiltered present fears. Attachment creates a longing to be known fully, even the parts that feel messy. Avoidants often compartmentalize. They separate relationship life from inner vulnerability. They may keep certain emotional rooms locked. You feel close but not fully inside. Ask yourself this. Do you know what they fear losing the most? Do you know what keeps them up at night? Do you know what insecurity they carry silently? Or do conversations always skim just above emotional depth? If you consistently feel like there is a layer you cannot reach, that is not your imagination. Attachment dissolves walls over time, avoidance maintains them. The ninth thing they cannot fake is fear of losing you. This one is the most revealing because when someone is truly attached, the thought of losing you activates anxiety, not possessiveness, not control, but genuine emotional disturbance. The bond matters. The separation feels threatening. Avoidants who are not fully attached may miss you if you leave. They may feel lonely. They may even circle back when you detach. But that reaction is often triggered by ego disruption or loss of familiarity, not deep bonding. There is a difference between missing access and fearing loss of attachment. If someone can detach cleanly, if they can emotionally shut down and walk away without visible internal conflict, attachment was not fully formed. Because real attachment destabilizes. It shakes the system, it creates longing that cannot be intellectually rationalized away. You may have seen this in moments where you tried to pull back. Suddenly, they leaned in. Suddenly, they seemed more invested. Suddenly, they expressed feelings more openly. That reaction can feel like proof, but often it is the activation of pursuit when distance feels safe again. Once closeness returns, their fear returns too. True attachment does not depend on you withdrawing to awaken it. It is consistent regardless of your distance. Now, here is where it gets even more complex. Avoidants sometimes believe they are in love. The feelings are intense, the chemistry is powerful. The early bond feels electric, but intensity is not the same as attachment. Intensity is driven by novelty and dopamine. Attachment is built through safety and oxytocin. One creates butterflies, the other creates calm. Butterflies feel addictive. Calm feels secure. If your relationship was full of highs and lows, passionate reunions and confusing withdrawals, you were likely experiencing intensity without stable attachment. And that roller coaster can trick you into believing it is deep love. The push and pull dynamic reinforces this confusion. When you lean in, they lean out. When you lean out, they lean in. This dance creates emotional spikes. You feel chosen when they return. You feel abandoned when they withdraw. That cycle bonds you through unpredictability. But unpredictability is not security. Their nervous system is regulating itself through distance. Yours is seeking stability through closeness. And unless both people consciously work towards secure bonding, that dance repeats. There is also something called trauma bonding, where emotional chaos mimics intimacy. When you fight, separate, reunite, and feel intense relief, your brain associates reconciliation with love. But stability is quieter. It is less dramatic. It does not flood you with adrenaline. And for someone used to chaos, stability can even feel boring. Avoidants often unconsciously recreate emotional distance because closeness feels overwhelming, so the relationship stays just unstable enough to avoid full attachment. But something fascinating happens sometimes. There are moments when avoidants realize they are attached, and it does not always look romantic. It often looks like anxiety. It may look like unexpected jealousy. It may look like discomfort when you truly pull away and do not chase. Because when you stop pursuing, when you reclaim your energy, when you emotionally detach, their nervous system may finally feel the absence, not the threat of engulfment, but the threat of loss. And that can awaken attachment signals they suppressed. However, attachment that awakens through fear is fragile unless they choose growth. Because sustainable bonding requires conscious vulnerability. It requires them to stay present when uncomfortable. It requires them to stop equating closeness with loss of self. And here is the part that matters most to you. Can avoidance form real attachment? Yes, but not through pressure, not through chasing, not through proving your worth. It happens through self-awareness, through healing, through learning to tolerate vulnerability without fleeing. If you are the only one doing the emotional labor, attachment will not form securely. It takes two regulated nervous systems willing to lean in. You cannot convince someone to attach to you by loving them harder. You cannot earn attachment by being more patient. You cannot heal their fear by shrinking your needs. And the moment you realize that, something shifts inside you. Because the goal is not to decode them endlessly. The goal is to choose someone capable of bonding. If you are constantly analyzing their behavior, trying to measure their feelings, waiting for consistency, hoping that this time intimacy will stick, your nervous system is exhausted. And love should not feel like emotional survival. Real attachment feels different. It feels steady. It feels like someone moves toward you during conflict, not away. It feels like vulnerability is welcomed, not avoided. It feels like intimacy deepens security instead of threatening it. So if you are listening and recognizing patterns, do not blame yourself for believing in the love you saw. It was real in moments, but moments are not attachment. Patterns are. And as we continue, we will go even deeper into the signs of transition, because sometimes avoidance do begin shifting. Sometimes they start tolerating discomfort. Sometimes they choose connection consciously, but you must learn the difference between temporary effort and true attachment growth. Because you deserve more than sparks. You deserve stability. You deserve someone whose nervous system does not panic when you get close. You deserve love that does not feel like guessing. And once you understand that avoidance can fake love but not attachment, you stop being hypnotized by intensity. You start choosing security. And that is where your power returns. And that is where your power returns. Because once you stop chasing intensity, you begin to see something clearly that you could not see before. You begin to understand that sometimes what felt like deep love was actually emotional chemistry mixed with fear. And now we need to go even deeper into the layers most people never talk about. There are moments when avoidants genuinely believe they are in love. The emotions feel real. The excitement feels undeniable. They think about you constantly in the beginning. They feel drawn to you. They feel inspired by you. But what they often mistake for attachment is emotional activation. It is the rush of novelty. It is the stimulation of connection without the weight of permanence. Early connection feels safe to them because it is still optional. There is no pressure yet. There is no expectation of lifelong merging. There is no full surrender, so they can show up passionately. They can text all day. They can plan trips. They can even talk about the future in abstract ways, because abstract future feels different than emotional dependence. But attachment changes the emotional stakes. Attachment says, this person matters to my stability, and that is when fear enters. Because if someone matters to your stability, you can be hurt deeply. You can be abandoned. You can lose control. For someone wired to avoid vulnerability, that risk feels threatening. So they may feel love, but unconsciously block attachment. They keep one emotional foot out the door, not because they want to hurt you, but because full surrender feels unsafe. Now let's talk about the push and pull dynamic in a way that hits deeper. When you move closer emotionally, their nervous system can interpret that as engulfment. Engulfment is the fear of losing oneself inside someone else. It is the fear of being consumed by someone's needs, expectations, or emotional intensity. So when you lean in, they lean out. Not because you are too much, but because their system cannot yet tolerate that level of closeness. Then something interesting happens. When you get tired and pull back, when you start detaching to protect your own heart, they suddenly feel the distance. And distance feels safer than closeness. So now they can move toward you again. They can express affection. They can show effort. They can say they miss you because now they are not overwhelmed. This cycle can feel intoxicating. It feels like proof that they care, but it is often regulation, not attachment. They move closer when it feels safe. They move away when it feels threatening. True attachment does not oscillate based on comfort levels. It remains present through discomfort. If you have ever felt like you were constantly adjusting your emotional volume just to keep them steady, you are participating in this cycle. You are shrinking your needs so they would not pull away. You were holding back tears so they would not shut down. You were lowering expectations so they would not feel pressured. And slowly you started disappearing inside the relationship. Now let's separate trauma bonding from real attachment, because this is crucial. Trauma bonding feels intense, it feels magnetic, it feels like you cannot let go even when you are hurting. There are high highs and painful lows. Reconnection after distance feels euphoric, apologies feel dramatic, promises feel passionate. But stability feels different. Stability feels calm. It feels predictable. It feels like someone choosing you daily without needing a crisis to remember your value. Trauma bonding keeps you hooked through unpredictability. Attachment keeps you grounded through consistency. Avoidants who are not securely attached may unintentionally create trauma bonds. The inconsistency keeps you seeking validation. The distance makes you chase reassurance. The reunion makes you feel chosen again. And that cycle creates chemical dependency. But ask yourself this: did you feel safe or did you feel addicted? Because love without safety feels like withdrawal when it disappears. Now, here is something very important. There are moments when avoidants begin to realize they are attached, and it often surprises them. It can happen when you genuinely detach, not in a manipulative way, but when you emotionally reclaim yourself, when you stop overgiving, when you stop chasing. Suddenly, they may feel restless, they may feel uneasy, they may start thinking about you more, they may reach out more consistently, because now the fear of loss is louder than the fear of closeness. This is often the first time their attachment system activates strongly, but here's the hard truth. Realization does not equal transformation. Feeling attached does not automatically mean they have the capacity to sustain it. If they have not worked on their fear of vulnerability, they may panic once closeness returns. That is why sometimes when avoidants come back, the pattern repeats. They feel the loss, return with emotion, reconnect intensely, then slowly distance again once things feel stable. Real change requires awareness. It requires them recognizing that their instinct to withdraw is protective but damaging. It requires them learning to sit in discomfort instead of escaping it. Can avoidance form real attachment? Yes, but only when they choose to confront their fear of dependency. Only when they stop equating closeness with control loss. Only when they learn that vulnerability is not weakness. And here is where you need to listen carefully. It is not your job to teach them how to attach. It is not your responsibility to shrink your needs so they feel safe. It is not your calling to prove that you are different from everyone who hurt them before. You cannot love someone into attachment if they are resisting it internally. The signs they are transitioning from fake love to real attachment are subtle but powerful. They start staying present during uncomfortable conversations instead of shutting down. They admit when they feel overwhelmed instead of disappearing. They begin initiating emotional discussions without being pushed. They tolerate your needs instead of labeling them as pressure. They start choosing connection consciously, not just when they are afraid of losing you, but even when everything feels stable. That is growth. And if that growth is not happening, you must ask yourself a painful but necessary question. Are you holding on to potential instead of reality? Because potential can feel intoxicating. You see glimpses of who they could be, you see moments of depth, you see flashes of vulnerability, and you hold on to those moments as proof. But attachment is not built on glimpses, it is built on patterns. If you constantly feel anxious, uncertain, hyper aware of shifts, that is your nervous system telling you something. Secure attachment calms your body. It does not keep it on alert. You deserve someone who does not interpret your closeness as threat. You deserve someone who moves toward you when conflict arises. You deserve someone whose fear of losing you outweighs their fear of intimacy. And here is the most empowering part of all this. When you stop chasing avoidant attachment, you begin forming secure attachment with yourself. You stop over-explaining, you stop over-proving, you stop over-sacrificing. You start observing behavior instead of analyzing words. You start trusting patterns instead of promises. You begin asking, does this feel safe? Instead of how do I make this work? And that shift changes everything. Because once you experience real attachment, the kind that feels steady and mutual, you cannot go back to emotional guessing games. Love should not feel like walking on emotional eggshells. It should not feel like you are one wrong word away from distance. It should not feel like you must manage someone else's fear to maintain connection. If you are listening and recognizing your story, take this in deeply. You were not too much. Your needs were not excessive. Your desire for consistency was not unreasonable. You were asking for attachment, not performance. Avoidance can fake love. They can mirror affection. They can create moments that feel magical, but they cannot fake the biological calm of bonding. They cannot fake staying through discomfort if their system is not ready. They cannot fake consistent presence if fear is still leading. And the moment you internalize that truth, you stop personalizing their distance. It was never about your worth. It was about their capacity. And as we continue into the final sections, we are going to close this loop in a way that leaves you empowered, not bitter. Because understanding this is not about labeling someone. It is about freeing yourself from confusion. You deserve attachment that feels like home, not attachment that feels like a test, Because love is not supposed to feel like you are constantly being evaluated for worthiness. It is not supposed to feel like you are auditioning for consistency. It is not supposed to feel like the prize for enduring emotional distance is a few moments of warmth. Real attachment feels like home, and if you have never experienced that, you might have mistaken chaos for chemistry. Let's close this by bringing everything together in a way that shifts you, not just informs you. When someone is truly attached, they do not just desire you, they rely on the emotional connection. Your presence regulates them, your absence unsettles them in a way that makes them move toward repair, not toward escape. They do not feel trapped by closeness, they feel strengthened by it. Attachment does not mean perfection. It does not mean no conflict. It does not mean no fear. It means fear does not win. With avoidants who are not securely attached, fear wins often. Fear of engulfment, fear of dependency, fear of losing control, fear of vulnerability, and every time fear wins, distance follows. You might have felt this pattern in your body before you understood it intellectually. The subtle tension when things were too good, the quiet anxiety when they suddenly needed space after intimacy, the way your heart raced when texts slowed down, the overthinking, the analyzing, the waiting. That is what happens when you are trying to attach to someone who is not fully attaching back. And here is something important. Your nervous system is not crazy. It was reacting to inconsistency. It was trying to find stability in a pattern that kept shifting. When love is secure, you do not feel like you are constantly bracing yourself. You feel chosen in the ordinary moments. You feel wanted even when you are not performing. You feel safe expressing needs without fearing abandonment. If you have been in a dynamic where affection came in waves, where vulnerability was met with withdrawal, where commitment conversations triggered distance, then you were likely experiencing love without attachment. And that can break you slowly, because love without attachment keeps you hopeful. It gives you enough warmth to stay, enough connection to believe, enough emotion to bond, but not enough stability to feel safe. You start trying harder, communicating better, being more understanding, giving more space, asking for less. You tell yourself they just need time. You tell yourself they are scared. You tell yourself if you stay steady, they will attach eventually. Sometimes they do, but many times they remain in that middle space, close enough to keep you, distant enough to protect themselves. And you deserve more than someone halfway attached. Now let's talk about what it looks like when attachment is actually forming in someone who once avoided it. It looks like discomfort that they do not run from. It looks like them saying, I feel overwhelmed right now, but I don't want to disconnect. It looks like them choosing to stay in hard conversations instead of shutting down. It looks like them initiating reassurance without being asked. It looks like them integrating you into long-term plans in concrete ways, not just dreamy language. It looks like consistency when things are calm and when things are tense. It looks like accountability instead of defensiveness. It looks like vulnerability without immediately creating distance afterward. That is growth. That is attachment forming consciously. But if those shifts are not happening, then you have to stop clinging to potential. Because potential does not warm your bed at night. Potential does not respond consistently. Potential does not hold you steady during conflict. Reality does. And if reality keeps showing you distance, you have to believe it. This is not about villainizing avoidance. Many of them carry deep wounds. Many of them learned early that emotional dependence was unsafe. Many of them survived by shutting down attachment needs. But survival strategies in childhood can become barriers in adult love. And compassion for their wounds should not cost you your peace. You can understand someone and still walk away. You can love someone and still recognize they are not capable of bonding in the way you need. You can feel chemistry and still choose security. That is maturity. That is self-attachment. Because the most important attachment you will ever build is the one with yourself. When you are securely attached to yourself, you stop chasing inconsistent love. You stop mistaking breadcrumbs for effort. You stop interpreting emotional distance as mystery. You see it for what it is: capacity. Some people have the capacity to bond deeply and consistently. Some do not, and that has nothing to do with your worth. If someone could not attach to you, it does not mean you are unlovable. It means their system could not tolerate that depth of connection. And here is something powerful. The right person will not feel overwhelmed by your closeness. They will feel honored by it. They will not interpret your needs as pressure. They will interpret them as invitations to grow closer. They will not disappear when things get intense. They will lean in. They will not make you question where you stand. You will know. You will feel it in your body, calm, steady, safe, no guessing, no chasing, no emotional math, just consistency. And once you experience that, you will look back at avoidant patterns and realize something profound. It was never love you were lacking. It was attachment. Avoidants can fake love in moments. They can mirror affection. They can create beautiful beginnings. They can even believe what they are saying, but they cannot fake staying. They cannot fake consistent emotional presence under pressure. They cannot fake vulnerability that deepens instead of retreats. They cannot fake prioritizing connection over control. They cannot fake fear of losing you if the bond was never fully formed. And once you understand that, you stop fighting reality. You stop trying to decode mixed signals. You stop exhausting yourself trying to earn permanence from someone who fears it. You start asking a different question, not how do I make them attach, but is this attachment healthy for me? That shift changes your life. Because when you choose someone who is capable of bonding, love feels different. It feels peaceful. It feels mutual. It feels safe. And you realize that attachment is not about intensity. It is about presence. It is about two nervous systems choosing each other repeatedly. It is about conflict that leads to deeper understanding, not distance. It is about vulnerability that builds closeness, not fear. If you have been loving someone who could not attach, let this be your clarity. You are not asking for too much. You are asking for something real, and you deserve nothing less, because love is beautiful. But attachment is what makes it last.